cache has a row. So all 500 caches are in the grid, and each one has a row, and you can scroll around up and down. And when you click on a cache in the grid, let's say the Dino cache, down below what's called the split screen, it'll show a map of where it is, and it'll show the information. Now this isn't coming from geocaching.com website right now. We've got all the information locally, so it can just show that. You don't have to be connected to the internet at this point. Correct. The maps are, Google Maps are coming for that. Okay, as we talked about, the GSAK has a grid view. Double clicking on the cache will open it in your browser so you can see all of it. If you right click on a cache in the grid, you can do that. There's a whole bunch of other options. As you see, there's all kinds of things. You can go to that URL on the geocaching.com website. You can change the coordinates, like if it's a puzzle cache and you've figured out what the final coordinates are, you can change it by going to edit here. So you can sort by any column in the grid, and the most useful sort is sort by distance. So let me just demo that quick. Right now it's showing our distance in kilometers for some reason. I believe that's the default when you install GSAK. Yes.
I'm sorry, this is Steph. Where did you get the edit screen? Right. Oh, just right.
You right click on the cache item. The question is where do you get the edit screen if you want to edit like the coordinates? You right click on the cache in the grid and then go to edit. And then the coordinates are here. Okay. Now to sort by distance, you have to select the center point. So let's say you find the continuing education. One of the options when you right click is to set this cache as the center point. Once you do and click on the heading that currently says kilometers, but you should probably set it to miles, you'll see that it's sorted now. The grid is sorted by how far away from this cache, the event cache, each of the caches are. But you can sort by anything. You can sort by waypoint name, any of the columns in the grid. Okay, so now we've got 500 caches. That's probably too many to do in a day, even though a lot around here are park and grabs. Right, Renee? We still can't do 500 in a day. She's saying no. So what you want to do is you want to filter down. Maybe you have certain criteria. You know, you're trying to find puzzle caches. You're trying to find multi-caches. Or you only want park and grabs. Let's say we want only caches whose terrain is less than 2. That'll be our filter. And you're able to do that in GSAK by going to the search menu and filter. And I'll show you that. Find GSAK. One of the items, basically you can filter by almost any criteria came down the pocket query, but one of them, it says terrain less than or equal to, right now it's set to 5. If we set that to 2, and hit go, something from Becca Day popped up. You see right down below the grid view, it's showing that there's now a subset. There's a filter applied, and it's showing that 419 out of the 500 caches are a 2 terrain or less. So that's most of them. So that really didn't cut down the numbers much. There's another thing you can do to limit the number of caches on a manual basis, and that's called user flags. Let's say there's just a handful of caches you want to find, maybe 5 or 10. You know their names. and you just want to select them manually decide to download them to your GPS. And you can do that by, in the grid view, there is a little man icon or person icon and a checkbox next to each cache in the grid view. That's called a user flag. And you can basically flag caches that you want as part of your download or filter. So if we just, let's say, select a couple, like these, there's a couple mystery caches here. These look interesting. Okay, so I just selected about 4 or 5 of them. Then if you go up to search and user flag set, it will only show the one where you've set that user flag. So that's another way to limit the scope of your download.
What does the bolding mean?
The bolding means that one has child waypoints. We didn't talk about that. Okay. Child waypoints, while we're talking about it, is essentially if somebody, when they listed their web page, also listed, let's say, parking coordinates or you know, a trailhead, those will also come down in the Pocket Query, and then they'll be also downloaded to your GPS automatically. Okay, now we've had our 500 caches. We picked a couple. I guess there's only 4 that we can do in an hour or 2 after this class. That kind of sucks, but that's all we can do is these 4. But now that we have them, we can go from GSAK, basically take that data from the GSAK database and put it into a GPS. And this is really what most people use GSAK to do. It's really good at it. It can handle pretty much any type of GPS without any additional software. The name under the hood is running this thing called GPS Babel. It's a separate program that you can also download. But it's easier to use it within GSAK. The first time you do a download to your device, you have to go to the GPS setup menu item and basically just select it by your brand and model. They figured out settings under the hood basically to do the right thing for your brand and model. So if you go under something like Garmin, you can see that they've got pretty much everything. The unit I have up here, it's a Magellan Explorers GC, so you just go to Magellan, Explorers GC, hit OK. So that was GPS setup. So now it knows what type of GPS it's talking to.
Jeremy, have you had any problems with your sending waypoints up to it and it doesn't hopefully?
I have not seen that. The question was, with this unit, have I had any problems with it? And no, I haven't. And supposedly these types of units, you know, can handle thousands of caches. So have not seen that. In this case, we're only downloading 4, so hopefully it works. So I'm going to connect it. Okay, the next step is you basically just go to the GPS menu, the same place the setup was, and go send waypoints. It's only going to send the ones that currently appear in your grid view. So if you have all 500 there, if you just want to send all 500, all that stuff we talked about filtering, you don't have to worry about it. It's just going to send all 500. Maybe that won't fit in your GPS with other things you have in there, so that's why you filter down. And the defaults are usually okay. We'll talk more about those later. When we go back to GSAK, so we go GPS. Send waypoints. There are some settings here. The settings are different for each type of GPS. This is something probably, you know, if you brought your GPS and your computer, we can go through at lunch and get you set up properly. Like I said, usually the defaults are okay. For older GPSs, sometimes what it tries to use is what's called a smart name. when it downloads, and it basically takes the name of the cache and shortens it to something it thinks makes sense. Some people like that, some people don't. It can be confusing. So that is one of the few defaults I would consider changing on this screen. I'm just going to keep the defaults and hit the send button. And it was that fast. Of course, we only had 4 caches. Okay, we're still in our story. Now we get to have fun. Well, actually, we got to wait until the beast. Right? This is a classic. The beast. So, we actually don't get to have fun until after the class, but we can pretend that we went out and we found a couple caches.
That tree was familiar.
Where is that tree? Do you know where it is?
Seen so many.
GeoBeacon. Okay, so you got the GPS or the geocache information in your GPS. You went out and you found some caches, and you've come back, and now you got to log the found caches. Certainly you can do what you've always done. You can just jump on the geocaching.com website and click each cache page and do your log that way. But there's a way with GSAK version 8 and greater, basically the newer version of GSAK, to do logging automatically. And the menu item for that is geocaching.com access, publish logs. Let me go to that. Ignore that. It should show up that there's no unpublished logs. So there's a couple options here. If you have a newer GPS, something like in Oregon, something like this, Explorers GC, like a 62T, if you mark it found in your GPS, you can actually just upload it right from your GPS. So you know in the field you've been marking them found. You can just right click, like it says here, right mouse click in this area, click fetch from a GPS.
That's for cut and paste.
You can do cut and paste quickly this way. Right. So what it should be doing is getting the information from my GPS. Let's see what it does. The second option, if you have an older GPS, is in the GSAK grid view. You can right-click on a cache, and one of the menu items in that right-click is add to the published logs list. So for each one, you can just go down and click them. There. So here are basically the 2 that I had marked as found in my GPS. Turning Point, I don't even know what that is. I think it's something I found last weekend. And this class, I found that. So, and depending on your GPS type, it'll actually figure out the log type. You know, was it a found it? Was it a DNF? Was it just a note? And it also has the date, time. So this is what it looks like if you get it from your GPS. Let me delete these out of here. So the other option is, let's say you found a very hard cache. Is it really very hard? It is? It's only a 2. Well, 2 terrain. Okay. Anyway, we found this. So if you right-click on a very hard cache, one of the items somewhere, add to publish logs.